We're 8 is the time. Let's suspend our conversation then about the Chancellor's mini-budget and move to policing affairs, because I'm pleased to say I have the privilege of the new Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police joining me now for a brief conversation. I speak, of course, of Sir Mark Rowley, who's already been Chief Constable at Surrey and was very senior in command at the Met and, of course, has taken over now as Commissioner. Thank you for coming on. And 2 offers of congratulations. First, Sir Mark, firstly, well done on getting the job. And secondly, the men and women who serve under you for the job that was done at the state funeral, which I think was probably the first thing to cross your desk. That was quite a baptism of fire, Sir Mark. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yeah, it was an unusual moment to arrive a couple of days after Her Majesty the Queen sadly died. But I mean, I've been involved in some of the previous planning over the years anyway. It was an extraordinary effort by our team. I mean, the policing of it was just immaculate. And I think what was interesting for me was to see the very visible policing on the streets and the engagement with the public, but then behind that, the number of specialists behind the scenes making sure that nobody could spoil the events through mischief or violence. An extraordinary job done by thousands and thousands of officers. And we had officers from across the country. Indeed. Every force in the country and some internationally were on the streets of London. Yep. It was a great moment for policing to help the country remember an extraordinary lady.
Indeed. Congratulations to you and all your colleagues serving under you.
Thank you.
Not at all, Smart. Let's move to other matters. The new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has ordered police chiefs to spend less time on, quotes, symbolic gestures. What do you imagine she means by symbolic gestures, Sir Mark?
I don't know, but I mean, the key part of what she's saying is the core of our job is about fighting crime, and I agree with her. My mission in terms of helping the Met bounce back from the challenges it faces, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to build more trust, less crime and high standards. And that captures the issues of the challenges to us, and the trust and crime is about what worries the public, and that's what we're going to do. And I think that's what the Home Secretary is talking about is that getting those basics right.
Well, it may be, of course, that some people would say that it's taking the knee, it's possibly wearing certain badges or ribbons, or police officers painting their fingernails or whatever it might be. Is that all going to stop on your watch?
I'm more focused, frankly, on trust and crime. I think the issue for the police is about operating without fear or favour. We shouldn't show allegiance to any political cause, whether it has 99% public support or 1% public support. Listen, I'm focused on trust and crime. The things I need to do are about rebuilding neighbourhood policing so that you have a community policing team in your area that understands what worries the community and is fixing it with you. I need to get the basics right, such as turning up to burglaries. And I sadly, I'm going to have to spend some time rooting out those officers who've let us down with they're corrupting our integrity. There's racists and misogynists, and we haven't been ruthless enough about them, and that needs to happen on my watch as well. So those are some of the things I'm really worried about.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to be ruthless?
So I'm going to talk in more detail about it in the forthcoming weeks, but it's about putting more resources in, the right technology. It's about the decision-making that has a zero tolerance of people who misbehave rather than being forgiving of it, and I think we've been too forgiving of it in the past. OK, but taking the knee has gone in the Met. Nick, you can try to go down this particular tangent. I'm saying we're not going to tie ourselves to.
You are the boss. If I was to call up to you, Gov, I'm policing a certain demo. Some of the blokes and women are asking, "Do you want us to take the knee?" What's the order, Gov?
So, in any demonstration, we don't show allegiance to the cause, whatever that cause is.
OK. If you were a young woman who regularly walked the streets of London late at night, currently, would you feel safe, Commissioner?
I can't put myself in the mind of a young woman. Many women feel safe in London a lot of the time, but too often they don't, and that's absolutely clear. And if we look at sort of the confidence in reporting rape and sexual assault has grown in recent years. There's many more reports come through where we need to do better at how we investigate those, and we're making progress on that at the moment. But there's a lot more to do, and we're working with sort of local communities and women's groups to look at where are the areas they feel least safe and where can we do more for them in terms of helping them feel safe. But there is a lot to do in that area. But most of all, the thing the police can bring to this is very clear focus on the men who predate on women and children. There are many men in the city, sadly, who are stalkers, they're rapists, they're involved in domestic violence, some of them are registered sex offenders. And the thing we bring to the to solving this problem alongside other agencies who offer a more supportive role to victims. The thing we bring most of all is the ability to identify and target those dangerous individuals.
But would you be happy for your daughters or your granddaughters to walk the streets of London at night?
Yes, I would be.
OK, let's move to other matters. There is undoubtedly a cost of living crisis at this time. Are you seeing a rise in theft and so-called petty crime as a result?
Nick, I've been in the chair for 2 weeks, so give me a chance to look at that. Of course, we know that sort of crime does fluctuate sometimes with the economy. The biggest issues for me, as I say, are about how we rebuild community policing so that people have trust in what's going on locally and that the police have got a grip of it. And secondly, how we get some of the basics right in terms of, say, responding to burglary. You'll have seen I've talked about sending officers to every burglary, which we haven't been up until now, which seems to me a big mistake.
I think many of my listeners would absolutely agree with you. Why do you suppose it is that burglary has effectively or had been relegated to such a low level within the Met?
So officers have a big workload and the systems put in place to prioritise things, and we've made the wrong call. I'm less interested in looking back at what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years when I wasn't in the Met. I'm more interested in focusing on what do I see today and what do we need to do to be better for the public and deliver, as I say, that increasing trust, less crime and those higher standards that people expect of us because we enforce the law.
Have you got a timeline, Sir Mark? You talk about more trust, less crime and high standards. Presumably you'll set certain markers along the way that you want to attain where you are in 12 months, 24 months or whatever. Sir Mark?
So by the end of this year, I will be able to demonstrate the things that we have done to start to make progress on those areas. You're not going to turn around public trust in 3 months, but I will be able to show the public, here are the first steps we've done in the first 100 days that are about increasing that trust and about reducing that crime.
Let's talk a little bit about anti-terror, an area you know very well. There have been suggestions from some police commentators that the Met has possibly grown just too big and that areas such as the National Counter-Terror Brief should be spun out to a separate unit or force. Do you concur with that idea?
That's sort of ill-informed nonsense, frankly. It may look an unusual arrangement to some outside who have no understanding of policing whatsoever, but 60% of the terrorists that are being worked on live in London. The majority of terrorist attacks take place in London. The London-centric nature of terrorism in this country means that separating it out from the Met would create a massive problem to then try and coordinate a policing terror organisation and the Metropolitan Police, because they would have to work so closely together. You'd say, well, why did we ever separate it out? And it would be a distraction from what I've got to worry about at the moment, which is improving policing for London.
OK. Let's move to other points. There were concerns after the Notting Hill Carnival expressed by the chair of the Met Police Federation, particularly as one female officer, I understand, was sexually assaulted at the carnival. Should it continue in its present guise, what changes will be needed possibly for next year's?
It's not my job to decide whether the carnival does or doesn't happen. That's the organisers, that's local politicians, that's the local safety committee. Every year we learn from what happens at the carnival and we make recommendations to improve the safety and policing of it. And we will do that again, and there'll be a lot of planning for next year's.
But presumably you'll make fairly strong recommendations, as one of your female officers was sexually assaulted this year and the chair of the Met Police Federation would like it stopped.
That's the chair's view. I think officers do an amazing job at Notting Hill Carnival, and they do face too much violence and too much unpleasantness. I completely agree with him on that.
But you wouldn't necessarily make representations. I mean, how would you improve the policing of it then?
Well, so the nature of the event is owned by the organisers, isn't it? And that's not for me to change that, but for us to make representations through there's a safety committee structure in terms of the way they organise it, the different areas within the footprint of the event, the stewarding of it, and all the other arrangements that can make policing easier or harder. And so we will make representations to improve that situation.
One of the biggest and most concerning problems, and I'm sure it worries you and your colleagues, is the number of youth fatalities, either through stabbing or gun crime in London. What do you and your colleagues plan to do about this? And when you see those headlines, lawless UK or lawless London, how do you react as Commissioner?
I think that's it's sort of tabloid type headline. It doesn't reflect the reality. There has been, over the last few years, there was a growth in the number of young people being murdered on the streets of London. We're heading towards a 20 or 25% reduction in murders this year. So the team have been making fantastic progress over recent months. There's some great work targeting drugs gangs who are behind a lot of the violence, which is making a lot of progress, and we're going to do even more of that, because it tends to be men of violence running the drugs lines, and as part of securing their trade, that drives a lot of the violence, and we're arresting more of them, and we'll build that capability even further.
Would you use the word success for the current business of trying to cut down on fatalities, Commissioner?
I think when you're talking about death, I think it's hard to talk about success, but we're making progress. If you compare us to other cities across the world, we have a murder rate per population better than a lot of global cities, but you always want to do better, don't you? I think sort of when I was last in charge of the murder command sort of 8 or 9 years ago, we had a first year ever where we got murder under 100. It'd be in London. It'd be great to get it down to that again, but we're going to get close to it, but not this year probably.
How much of the shine has been taken off the Met by the fact it's in special measures?
So I've taken over an organisation, I've been very candid about this, which needs to bounce back. We've had some very high-profile scandals with officers where it's very clear we haven't had enough control of the integrity of our workforce. We've got a great majority, but there's too many being able to get away with corrupting the integrity of the organisation with racism and misogyny. And our basic service to the public, the inspectorate have criticised, and I think in most respects they're accurate. And that's why I spoke about things like burglary earlier. So we need to bounce back from a difficult moment, but I have a majority of great men and women who are honest and dedicated, often heroic, and with them and with a clear focus, we will bounce back.
Last couple of minutes. When do you hope to have come out of special measures, Commissioner? Have you set yourself a target or a deadline?
I have a view in my mind, but I'll sort of see what progress we can make. But it's not going to be 2 or 3 months. But over the next year or so, I'm sure we can bounce out of it.
You'd hope to be out of special measures in 12 to 18 months. Is that correct?
That sounds like a reasonable timescale to me.
OK. One other senior police officer, Stephen Watson, a man you'll know well in Greater Manchester, you're probably aware, has told his officers they must shave off their designer stubble, make sure their boots are polished, and for female officers they must make sure their hair is tidy. Is that going to be the same at the Met?
Appearance matters, professionalism matters, and standards matter, so yes.
They will be doing the same. You want designer stubble gone?
I'm not going to get into sort of silly rhetoric like that, Nick. The point is about smartness and appearance.
I don't know the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester thinks it's silly, respectfully, Commissioner. He says it's the image that's put forward, Commissioner.
Smartness, appearance and professionalism matter, and that's what we're going to be about. OK.
Last couple of questions. I don't expect you to comment into the live investigation into the shooting of Chris Cabba, but what sympathy do you have with your colleagues who threatened to hand in their firearms over the way their colleague was treated?
That's misreported nonsense. I have a very, very dedicated group of firearms officers who go out day in and day out confronting the most extraordinary difficult situations to protect London, and they wouldn't put down their firearms and let down London. So
that was just journalists getting the story wrong?
That's sort of mischief makers sort of offstage, so to speak. We have a serious job to do protecting London, and with respect to the death of Chris Cabba, we will do everything possible to help the IOPC get the evidence together as quickly as they can do so that the truth can be laid out in front of whatever legal process follows.
You've already met with the family. How would you, again, I don't expect you to share anything, how would you characterise the outcome of that meeting, Commissioner?
Nick, it's a private meeting, and I think it'd be disrespectful to talk about it in any detail whatsoever. I'm sorry.
Not at all. I respect that. Lastly, yesterday the papers were rather full of the fact that the Met has brought down the level under which people are fined for speeding. So whereas you might have been able to do 24, I think it is now 23 and so forth. My listeners are concerned with all the crime that's going on and that you and your colleagues are about to challenge. Why would you be doing that? Is that necessarily the priority when you should be going after burglars?
There are nationally agreed guidelines, I think, in terms of speed enforcement standards. I think the Met has simply, sometime over the last year, before I was imposed, simply aligned with those, which doesn't seem to be that contentious, albeit it does get some pickup in the media at the moment. There are far more important things for me to worry about in terms of the trust of Londoners, reducing crime, and those high standards that we need to return to.
But then why are you going after motorists then? If there are more important things... my listeners would say, by the way, they'd agree, let's get a bloke in who wants to get more trust, bring about less crime and raise standards. Why are you going after someone who's done 24 miles an hour?
So these are national guidelines, and it does make a difference if you hit somebody at 26 miles an hour rather than 23 miles an hour. It makes a big difference in terms of the chance of someone surviving that incident. And that's why those limits have been changed, and that's why that national guidance exists. And I don't see why you would want Londoners to be less safe on the roads than they are in other parts of the country if we have a different standard.
I wish you very best of luck, you and your colleagues. More trust, less crime and high standards. Thank you for your time. I look forward to you coming in and taking questions when you can from my listeners as well. Commissioner, thank you. Sir Mark Rowley, new Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, appearing here on LBC, where at 3 minutes after 8 news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.